Hey guys and gals, Vlad here with AVT-Astro, and today, as always, I've got an interesting astro topic for you guys. And what might that be, you might ask? Well, of course, none other than the ultimate accessory guide to the Nexstar 6SE and 8SE for both astrophotography and EAA. For those of you that might not be familiar, I run a little astro blog called AVT-Astro.com, and of course this YouTube channel, so if you're not subscribed, please do consider subscribing. Over the years, I've had the privilege of owning over 100 scopes, more accessories than I could count, and this is one of the setups. Now guys, just in case you're new to my channel and you have not seen the previous video that I've made on the ultimate accessory guide for the Nexstar series of telescopes, please do watch that. I'm linking it in the link up above because that has a whole different set of accessories. Those are more visual type of primary accessories, but you know, there's some that can kind of crisscross in that type of deal. Also, do stick around to the end of the video because I do have one important, really important suggestion that I will make for you if you're considering building out a Nexstar based astrophotography or EAA rig. Alrighty guys, so with all the intro stuff out of the way, let's get down to look at some of these beautiful accessories, right? We'll kind of start from the down here and work our way up. All right, so the first item that we'll talk about is something that's not super pricey, which is kind of a rare thing in astrophotography, and that's these guys. These are, they're called anti-vibration pads or vibration suspension pads. Basically what they are is three little hockey puck type of deals that have these little jello material built in that you put them under your tripod, and basically, they help to dampen the vibrations. Now, do they actually work? Do they actually help you out? Well, guys, it really kind of depends on what conditions you're using them on. If you have your tripod set up on a hard surface, you know, of some type, you know, probably it's going to be like cement or asphalt or something like that, then yeah, these guys actually do, you know, help out, especially if it's, you know, a little bit of windy outside, because the Nexstar 6SE and 8SE mount isn't exactly known for its stability. So overall, guys, as we're going through these, I'll kind of give these their number rating. I think if you're going to be using these, your scope on a hard surface, if there's going to be any wind at all, these are definitely a worthwhile investment. They're not very expensive. So yeah, I'd rate these a solid like 8 or 9. All right, next up, we have none other but the Celestron soft case that they make, you know, for basically the telescope itself. So guys, this, you know, I had this in my other kind of ultimate accessory guide. You know, that'll fit basically the arm and the scope portion itself. It won't fit like, you know, the wedge and the tripod and all that type of, you know, goodie. It does have a few pockets inside. It's kind of like, you know, it's considered a soft case, but it's pretty hard. I mean, you really wouldn't damage the scope inside of it. I like these. I think they're pretty cool. They are kind of pricey though. So, you know, take it for what it is. I'd give this one, I don't know, like if you kind of like the look and kind of, you know, like the protection of it, I'd probably give it like a solid 6 or a 7. All right, kind of working our way up, the next thing that we've got is the Celestron power bank. I've got several reviews. I'll link one to this particular one, but I also have other ones. So you are gonna need, you know, some kind of power, like using the AA batteries that, you know, the Nexstar can run off of. For astrophotography, really isn't going to do, so you will need some kind of a battery power. Celestron ones are pretty nice. Depending on how advanced of a rig you get, you might want to get something that's, you know, way more advanced than this though. Especially if you're going to be running a Dou heater on your optics, you know, especially if you're doing it like all night long. Alrighty guys, so now we are getting to the meat of what makes astrophotography or EAA really possible, especially astrophotography though, on, you know, on your Nexstar scope, and that is the wedge that Celestron makes. So guys, basically for astrophotography, essentially what the scope is doing, right, you need to have the capability of tracking the sky very precisely, you know, for your camera to be able to expose, you know, the night sky basically, because the Earth rotates. All right, so what this guy allows you to do is to precisely set, you know, the tilt of the telescope axis, so this axis here, to wherever you are, you know, on the Earth. Like we're at about 45 degrees here, so that's kind of, you know, what I have it set at right now. So anyhow, this is what allows you to actually pull, it's called polar aligning the telescope to the axis of the Earth. And in that configuration, what's really cool is that instead of the telescope having to track in both axes, right, it actually only tracks in one axis. So that kind of eliminates, essentially, the need to run this motor at all, so that kind of halves your, you know, kind of chances of messing up any of your exposures. So that's really cool. Overall, guys, if you are going to be doing astrophotography, especially with your Nexstar scope, I mean, this is a must buy. They're not super cheap. I mean, they're pretty expensive because this one, they use up to the 11-inch CPC series. So it's a pretty beefy, you know, rig. But yeah, I mean, overall though, you know, besides the price, there's really no downsides to this. I mean, it is a little heavy. All right, you probably noticed these guys. We'll kind of come back to them. The next thing, you know, obviously we'll kind of get to is that you will need some kind of astronomy camera. You know, I won't really get into like the different, you know, camera designs, you know, watch a different video about that. You know, you'll need some kind of astronomy camera. If you do have a DSLR, you know, that works really well. I personally use the ASI2 94 MC Pro. I have a link to a few cameras that I kind of personally recommend, just in case, you know, you kind of want to get a basis for that. This crazy thing, this is called a flip mirror. So if you do want to do EAA, which is electronically assisted astronomy, I'm linking up a video in the corner, you know, right now, basically of, you know, how this gizmo works. So if you're, you know, so if you're curious, I mean, check that out. But basically allows you to do both EAA, to both record through the camera and to look through an eyepiece with this flip mirror gizmo. All right, and at this point, we'll burn out this guy. This is the Celestron 0.63 reducer corrector. That basically would normally go over here between your camera and, you know, like the telescope itself. And what that does is natively these scopes, whether you've got the 6SE or the 8SE, they're at f10, which is pretty slow for, you know, for astrophotography. Pretty narrow field of view, which will make tracking more difficult and, you know, your life in general more difficult. So the faster that you could get this, the better. The f6.3 reducer, these I believe are about 150 bucks brand new. If you're doing either EAA or astrophotography, I mean, this is pretty much a must buy, you know, for this type of a setup. Now, depending on the scope that you have, you can also get a Hyperstar based to where you replace the secondary mirror and shoot at f2 with an SCT. So if you've got the option to do that, not all of these will have that, but if you have the option to do that, that is kind of a nice accessory to have too. Very pricey though, so I wouldn't consider that to be like a really, you know, kind of entry-level friendly type of a gizmo to get. Alrighty guys, and now we are getting to the Celestron auto guider. So this thing, it's kind of a new accessory. This is the first time I've actually tried one of these out. So this thing actually does three things, you know, kind of all at once. Pretty crazy. So it'll align your telescope for you. I'm posting the clip right now that's kind of sped up of how quickly it could do it. Check this out. Does it in under 2 minutes. Pretty impressive, guys. I was pretty impressed with how quickly this one aligns. I think it's faster than the old one. I've had the old one before. It's been a few years though. The other thing that it can do is also help you with polar aligning. So polar aligning your telescope, this will actually help you do that. I personally use a program called SharpCap, so you can do, you know, without this, and honestly with SharpCap I think it works, you know, quite a bit easier. But if you want to be able to do a polar alignment, you could do it with just your hand controller, you know, with the Celestron Nexstar hand controller. Oh, and by the way, guys, you know, while I'm talking about this, you do need to have one of the newer Celestron Nexstar Plus hand controllers to be able to use that. So if you have an older version of one of these scopes, yeah, that will not work. So you will need to, you know, to get a new hand controller if you have one of the older ones. And thirdly, as it says right there, this thing is also able to auto guide for you. So what is auto guiding? Well, just really quickly, guys. So when the telescope is, you know, doing your long exposures, right? Typically, you know, you're doing probably at least a couple of minute exposure if you're doing astrophotography. There's always going to be some error, like in the drive mechanism of your telescope. So what the auto guider does is, you know, it basically it takes pictures as well, because there's a camera in there. And they'll send corrections to your mount to where, you know, it'll basically make your exposures better. So how would I rate this? Like, do I consider this to be like a total necessity? Well, guys, I mean, it kind of really depends. So if you want to be able to use your scope, you know, more or less, you know, just with controlling it with your hand controller, without like running a laptop necessarily, which, you know, if you're doing a DSLR, you could definitely do. If you're doing a dedicated astronomy camera, you're going to need a laptop anyway. But anyway, if you want to kind of avoid, you know, like, you know, having to lug around a laptop, let's say if you are doing astrophotography with DSLR, then yeah, I think this thing is a pretty cool accessory. I mean, they are priced there, I think like $800 or something like that. So I mean, it's definitely not cheap. Overall though, cool accessory. It does work pretty well, so I like it. I mean, my only gripe with it is that I wish that it was like half the price. Overall though, if you know, let's say you can kind of get over the price point, I'd rate this a solid like 8 or a 9. All right, so and then moving on, this is kind of where I'll burn out this gizmo. If you do want to do, this is basically the same thing as I already have mounted. It's kind of hard to see with all my cables there. But anyway, this allows you to mount a camera on top of your telescope to do astrophotography that way. So let's say if you do have a DSLR with, you know, like a nice lens, you could do it that way at a much lower focal length, which will be a lot more forgiving. So you're still going to be using like the tracking of the actual telescope, but you'll be, you know, shooting through the, you know, not through the telescope, but basically through whatever lens you have attached to your camera. So these things are super cheap. If you have a DSLR and you want to, you know, kind of practice doing astrophotography, this is actually a really good way to start. Because naturally, let's say if you have like a 200mm lens on your DSLR, right? I mean, think about it. You're shooting at 2000mm or like 1600 if you have the f6.3 reducer versus, you know, like 200mm. You know, imagine hand holding a 1600mm lens. Really hard to do, right? It'd be pretty shaky. Same thing with this guy. I mean, the Nexstar mount, you know, they're like, check this out, guys. So, you know, not the most stable platform, right? So shooting at 1600mm is a lot tougher than shooting at 200mm or whatever lens you might have. Alrighty guys, and last but not least, I saved the best for last. This is a must-have accessory depending on where you live, and that is a Dou Shield. So this is one of the newer Celestron aluminum ones. I've done a review of this guy. Posting a link right here right now. You can get the cheaper, you know, flexible versions. They work just as well. Like I said though, guys, I mean, this overall is one of the, I'd say, most must-have accessories for whether you're doing visual or astrophotography or whatever with your SCT, because Dou forms incredibly quickly on the corrector plate of SCTs. I'm posting in like a little clip that I shot earlier. When I was doing a review of the Dou ring, there's actually a Dou ring that Celestron makes for these scopes. I'm posting the link, you know, to that review right now as well. So yeah, guys, this is the totally must-have. It also serves the function of, you know, say if you live in the desert, you don't have any Dou, that's, you know, that's awesome, great for you guys, but you still have light, right? Or potentially maybe straight light that could, you know, go in and kind of hit your corrector plate, which the Dou Shield helps to prevent as well. So overall, guys, Dou Shield, depending on which version you get, the aluminum one's kind of pricey. The flexible ones, they're under 50 bucks. This is, to me, an easy 10 out of 10. Depending on where you live, like if you live somewhere like, you know, like I do, like, you know, in the Northwest, you know, it's incredibly wet out here. Like I always have to run Dou heaters. So like if you do live in a really wet area, you know, having either the Dou ring or just like a Dou strap that goes around the outside of the scope is also a 10 out of 10. Only if it's wet though, you know, where you live. Alrighty guys, so you've made it to the end of the video and you're like, Vlad, what is the tip that I've been waiting for the whole video? Well, you know, this is like an honest thing that I just want to kind of steer in the right direction, I guess. Like you know, like if you watch my other videos, I do really like the Nexstar scopes. They're great telescopes to, you know, to begin with, like as your first serious scope and that type of deal. That's primarily for visual use, or if you want to do EAA, they're great for that as well. Now guys, honestly, like if you're kind of like, you know, if you kind of made it to the, you know, this far in the hobby to where you want to do astrophotography, but this was the telescope that you bought with, you're like, well, you know, this thing looks pretty cool, right? Like, you know, like I want to do this. Honestly guys, if I'm to be honest with you, this is not really the setup that I would kind of go with, you know, to do serious astrophotography. As I showed you in the clip before, I mean, you know, like look at how wobbly this mount is, you know, like, and this is just for me, you know, just kind of pushing it, you know, just with my finger, right? I mean, imagine a wind gust, you know, hitting your scope. So basically, anytime that anything happens, right, that exposure is going to be ruined for you. I mean, the reality is that these telescopes, the Nexstar series telescopes, they were never designed to do astrophotography. So personally, what would I do? I honestly, like if I had one of these, right, there's nothing wrong with the tube. I mean, the tubes on these are, you know, great. What you need is a better mount, essentially. So what I would do is, instead of, you know, getting this wedge for 350 bucks, is I would actually invest in a better mount. At the least, even the Celestron AVX mount, that's basically their kind of like entry-level go-to mount, would do much better than this setup for actual real astrophotography. So anyway, guys, hopefully you guys found this video interesting and informative. You know, I do want to kind of steer you guys in the right direction. Like if you're, you know, astrophotography is your journey, you cannot spend enough on the mount in astrophotography. I mean, you know, anybody that's, you know, seriously into astrophotography will tell you that it's kind of an unfortunate truth. So anyway, if you guys have any questions, comments, or anything like that, please leave them in the thing below. If you're not subscribed, please do consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.